Save the Semantics, episode 360. It is January 2nd, 2026. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Friday afternoon. We are in the new year. We are here in 2026. It is what it is. I don't feel I don't feel particularly different, you know. I think as time continues to go on, as I've sort of talked about, it becomes less and less relevant to me what, you know, the timing of things. Obviously, looking back at certain events, knowing that, you know, things like high school and, you know, even now college for me are pretty far in the past, not that far, but, you know, pretty significant amount of time. I'm a pretty significant amount of time removed from that point in my life. So just kind of looking back, of course, it's going to be, you know, kind of when you remind yourself of when those things were, it's going to feel a little weird, you know, because, you know, you got like a decade, 15 years, 20 years, 2 decades have passed since this moment in time was a thing, right? And it's I think there is truth, you know, people talk about, and you hear this all the time, and you hear this all the time for a reason, is that, you know, as you get older, time seems to keep, you know, kind of keep going quicker, and it's just true, right? And, you know, there's like a number of reasons for that. I think that you can kind of pinpoint to just the structure of your life revolving around certain things. When as a kid, every single day was something new in a sense, right? It is like interesting looking back and thinking of when I was younger, and there were just like days and weeks where it just felt like it was going forever. It just felt like it felt the longest amount of time possible, but it's just different now, you know. It's really not, it's not the same, right? It's just not the same. And I think it's funny when, you know, I talk a lot about video games on here, obviously. And a lot of the conversation revolves around when games are announced and when they're supposedly going to be, you know, released and that kind of thing. There's this kind of waiting period, right? I mean, you look at something, you know, you look at Hollow Knight Silksong, for example, where that game, it took, you know, forever. It took 7-8 years since its announcement to finally come out. And I was not one of those people who was adamantly waiting for the game. I was excited for it because I really enjoyed Hollow Knight. But in terms of, I wasn't part of the fandom that was doing the whole clown makeup, that kind of thing, right? I was someone that I felt for the fans who were wanting and, you know, hoping for a release in years gone past, and when it didn't happen, there was just this such a deep disappointment, right? There was announcement that, oh, the game's going to be released with Xbox, with Xbox and Game Pass. They showed it in a reel with the Switch 2, which kind of was the final indication that the game is finally going to come out. But it took a long time to get to this point, right? But in reality, for myself, when it comes to releases, I think the one that comes to mind most when it comes to waiting for a game to be released is probably Tears of the Kingdom, I think, right? And this was before we had been given the title. This was when it was named or titled the sequel to Breath of the Wild. And that was announced pretty early on. And it felt, it took quite a long time to get to that point. But in reality, that kind of time has come and gone, right? Which is crazy to think. There was such an expectation for it, and of course, when it finally released, it was just kind of a sense of relief and everything, but it wasn't this whole. I don't know. It's not your life continues to keep moving along with this thing that happens, right? And even when these kind of these big releases happen, or what I consider to be big releases that happen, of course they take up a huge chunk of your time in the moment, right? For Tears of the Kingdom, that was maybe 2-3 months of the year was, that was kind of my dedicated leisure time, and but even then, it's a very short period of time, in all things considered, right? And a lot of people finish that game in weeks or even a week or so, and then they moved on to the next thing, which is kind of crazy to me, right? I tend to, at least the games that I play, I tend to, they are lengthier games, right? Longer playthroughs and everything for the most part, as our typical JRPGs. So I tend to dedicate a lot more time to those games, and obviously, just coinciding with the amount of time that I have. Also, I'm not someone who games professionally or is a streamer or YouTuber or anything like that. It's just it's just for fun for me. So I'm able to, I have to sort of a certain amount of time to it, and I also have some other interests as well outside of gaming. So it's, but I do kind of, I feel I treat it more as, at least from my personal experience, I do try to treat it more as an event. Or if it's, if I'm not playing it on release, I do try to put in a good amount of time into it. I try to dedicate a good amount of time because I feel it's worthwhile. In this past year, that was for The Witcher 3, right? And also Xenoblade a little earlier in the year. But I think it's I don't know. I think there's just approaches to it. I don't know what exactly my point is. I just think that it's interesting. There's this waiting period. There's this anticipation, this hype, and people are saying, "Oh, I can't wait to play this. I can't wait. When is it going to come around?" And then it comes, and then it goes, right? And I think there's this sense of there's absolutely something psychological there, where the amount of time you wait is actually, it feels so much longer than it is the amount of time that you dedicate to the thing that you were waiting for, right? And I'm not sure, I'm not sure what the brain is. I don't know. I think there might be something about the joyous moments in your life tend to feel shorter than the other periods of time. That feels a little cynical, and maybe a little bit a little pessimistic. I don't want to really look at things that way. And I think there is something of where I'm trying to reframe thinking of life in that way. Of course, there are things that I am looking forward to, absolutely. And I think I've done a decent job of sort of living day to day in the moment, in the present, like I am right now, where I am not just simply waiting for the next thing to prop up, whether it is a big release or, say, the NBA playoffs or something along those lines, right? Or a big life event, which is something that is coming up for me. These are things that in reality are going to come and go, and I think I just have to sort of, and maybe this is sort of a reflection upon last year and going into this next year, moving forward, that I do want to continue, despite there is a lot of anticipation for myself in looking forwards to the next event, whatever that might be, but to also enjoy this period of time as well, when it is slower, in a sense, when there is kind of this lull period, right? Calm before the storm, but maybe in a more positive light. And so I think that's kind of just kind of taking into consideration, looking at certain things, there is a lot to find enjoyment in on a daily, regular basis. Of course, it's not always going to be easy. Not every day is going to be particularly good, but I do think that you can find things that can bring something of, something that's kind of important to you in a way, right? Where it's not this event was the thing that, that makes your year. And maybe it is for some people, and that's perfectly fine too. But I think for myself, I want to try to not be, not try to leverage one thing over the other, but just try to kind of level off things across the board, enjoy things on a more consistent basis if I can, and just sort of sit with things, maybe sit with a somewhat of an uncomfortable feeling or an uncomfortable moment, right? Because that would also allow me to enjoy the great moments in the present, right? And it doesn't feel like life is passing you by in a sense. So I think it's just, it was a bit of a ramble. Of course it is. But I think I'm just trying to remind myself that while there are a lot of things to look forward to, it is good to enjoy this moment presently as well, because that will also translate to you enjoying those other moments present in the present. So I think that's kind of my headspace. I think I've done a good job of that. I think I've done a pretty good job of that over the course of this past year, but I want to try to continue to do that, I don't want to, there's setting certain dates as, this is the next thing to look forward to, and you just have to kind of struggle to get to that point. I can't do that to myself, because then I'm sort of robbing myself of living and enjoying life on a more regular basis, right? Because there's going to be things that I miss out on if I simply put my blinders on and focus on a specific date or specific time frame. I just don't think I'm not doing myself any justice in doing that. So it's about taking things maybe not necessarily slow, because it's hard you personally can't stop time, but you can put more things into your daily life that make it more worthwhile outside of just these not random, but these larger events that might happen. So that's kind of maybe a reflection that I'm trying to take forward going into this year, which will be a pretty big year for me. So I'm trying to be cognizant of that and really just kind of sit with it and all that. So so New Year's was good. Yeah, I think there was really there's not really any different feeling. Honestly, these holidays were pretty quiet in a way. I mentioned before that we had lost power, so part of it was kind of sitting in the dark and not doing too much while it was pouring rain outside. But yeah, along with that, I think just sort of this New Year passage going into 2026 was pretty quiet, pretty tame. I think it's usually the case for myself, but I think even more so this year. There wasn't the same sense of, I don't know if fanfare is the right word, but I think there was this almost kind of ease of transition into this year where it doesn't really feel, it really doesn't feel all that different, right? And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think that it's interesting, because I do think looking back on certain years, there is a bit more of the celebration of going into another year, and maybe it's because the time and place, the people that I'm with, or just the particular person that I was at that time. Maybe it was something where I was treating it with a bit more of a gravity as opposed to now. So I just think it's, I think everybody treats these sort of things differently depending on, who they are currently and where they, what kind of person, or, who they are currently and where they are in their lives. I spent a good amount of time continuing on with my playthrough of Suikoden II. Been really enjoying that. I just played through this one battle sequence, this kind of simulation / tactical RPG gameplay section, kind of similar to a Fire Emblem, although way more simplified in comparison to Fire Emblem, but still fun. And I think that aspect, I was talking about this last time when I was when I talked about my favorite games that I played last year, and I think that sort of tactical / simulation RPG aspect was what kind of made me want to get back into Fire Emblem and possibly pick up Engage. I'm still very much on the fence on that. I don't know if I'll actually do that. It's entirely possible. I could go back and play either Three Houses or Fates, right? Fates, I've only beaten Birthright, and I've talked about this before, but I picked up the other two routes, along with when the eShop, the 3DS eShop was closing. I wanted to pick those two up because I don't, it's pretty hard to get a physical copy of Conquest, and I think you just can't get. I don't think a physical copy of Revelations is available unless it's with the special edition of the game, and that's being sold at a ridiculous price, right? Because that's a limited run edition. So, I thought, might as well just get those two copies. I don't know if I'm going to get back into them anytime soon, but at least it is there if I am kind of craving a little bit of Fire Emblem. But I am sort of thinking about, do I want to experience... It would technically be new for me because I never played Conquest or Revelations, but I do think that there is kind of this sense of wanting to get a little bit of a new flavor with something like Engage, right? And I think Three Houses, I've mentioned this before, but I do have some qualms in which the way the routes take place, the fact that you have to kind of go through the academy setting every single run. And I think I'm just not particularly fond of the calendar system. It feels very tiring to me. It feels kind of taxing to me. Kind of in a similar way to, I think, I think they sort of borrowed that concept from Persona, and I just wasn't the biggest fan of the calendar system in Persona as well. It just felt like a lot of busy work. And at a certain point, it just felt it was kind of dragging its heels, and I wanted to kind of continue forward with the story, in Three Houses in particular, and you just had to kind of go through each day, and I think there are ways in which you can sort of skip ahead, but if you want to optimize your stats and your troops and whatnot, you have to kind of spend more time going around in the church or the monastery, and improve your classmates' relationships. If you want to try to recruit certain classmates from the other houses, that takes quite a bit of work, and I just don't have I just don't have the patience for that at this point. So I think that's kind of what's putting me off. That's what's put me off from replaying Three Houses and doing the other routes, right? I just can't. It's too much of a. It feels like a lot to go through those, through that kind of early section of the game before it becomes a different game altogether, or becomes a different story down the route. So, yeah, that's kind of something that I am not a fan of, and there's also some of that hesitancy with wanting to play some of the other Persona games as well. So that's kind of where I'm at. But I am craving especially that gameplay aspect of it. And I think that Engage in particular is pretty different from Three Houses, in which the gameplay is definitely the more higher quality section, while the story is kind of nonsensical, right? And I think, I think it's just about giving it a fair shot, you know what I mean? Um, I've kind of mulled over it over and over again. Um, and I think I just have to sort of think about what it is that I value, because I have played games recently, most especially Unicorn Overlord, where the story is pretty basic, right? There's nothing really, it's very standard. But the gameplay was so good and so fun that it really doesn't it really didn't matter too much. So that might also be the case with Engage, and I think I just have to sort of put aside my thoughts and feelings of the story, and honestly it might just come down to me skipping ahead on some cutscenes, right? If I really just am not interested, I can just play through the game, right? And I think that, I don't know, maybe that's a bit that might be a bit sinful on my end, because I am someone who does care about the story. But if I am particularly not enthused by Engage's story, that just might be the case, right? Again, I'm just thinking about things. That might be the next game on my list. I don't know when I'm going to get to it. Probably not anytime soon. Maybe if I am able to beat Suikoden over this next week or so, which is what I'm aiming for, before I'm taking a bit of a trip before I start my new job. So it might be before then. But I don't know. Am I going to have, I might not have the same amount of time as I would now. So right now I'm focusing on Suikoden 2. I am considering what the next game I want to play is. That might be Engage. The other one that I have considered is 100 Line Defense, which was made by the creator of Danganronpa. I haven't gotten into that series. I don't know if that's really my cup of tea. It feels, from my understanding, there are a lot of anime tropey kind of stuff. I'm not the biggest fan of that. But I think in this game in particular, from what I've heard, it is a very ambitious title. Speaking of Vanillaware, there are some comparisons made between this game and 13 Sentinels, so that feels pretty appealing to me. I know that it is a very different game tonally, and it is a very different game aesthetically, but in terms of the just sort of the ambition of the story, that kind of draws me in. That sounds very interesting to me, right? And then the combat is also tactical as well. There is also a demo available, so that will allow me to maybe try it out. That's kind of a perfect that might be the perfect kind of approach to this game in particular, right? Get a sense of what, how things kind of look like. Apparently the save also carries over, so that's perfect. I love that. That just feels great. I really love when games provide these types of demos where the save is, you can carry that forward. Similar, the last one I did was for Trails in the Sky first chapter. So that's just a winning formula to me. I understand that there is hesitancy by developers not wanting to provide like a quote unquote free copy of the game, where maybe there are instances where if you do play a game and you realize that it's not your thing, you're not going to outright buy it, which is, might potentially dissuade customers from getting the game outside of just buying it on release, right? But if you are if you are consumer friendly, if you actually care about the consumer, I think having demos available is a huge win in my book. So I'm happy to give that a shot once I wrap up my playthrough of Suikoden 2. So I think that's going to be the approach. I also downloaded a demo for Ys 9 because I was kind of craving a little bit of the Falcom gameplay, just that feel, the music. When I was playing Trails in the Sky, there were certain music compositions that were reminiscent of East 8, which I loved. One of my favorite games that I've played in the last, I don't know, 5-6 years or so. That particular flavor, I think they just do a really good job of crafting. The East series are different from the Trails series, right? But there is something that kind of scratches an itch, just the way in which that developer, just the aesthetics of that developer and the music in particular, I think just kind of hits it for me. And yeah, and maybe it's possible that the performance is improved with the playing it on Switch 2 as opposed to playing it on the original Switch. There were a lot of just looking at some gameplay footage of East 9. It did not look super great on the original Switch. While I love East 8, I think the biggest issue of that game was the fact that it looked like a old PS3/PS2 game at times, and yeah, it just did not run. It ran fine. It just did not look the most aesthetically pleasing at times. So, I think that if East 9 is able to run decently on Switch 2, then I might get that. But I'll also give the demo a shot as well to see kind of how I feel about it. East 10 is also out there, which is something that I'm considering as well. But I might just play 9 first, or whoever knows how long. It's not like high on my list of games, but I was kind of just craving a little bit of that Falcom, that vibe after playing Trails in the Sky. But it's been a good week though. I think overall it's been a good week going into this weekend. Just sort of taking a little bit of time for myself when I can, seeing some friends when I can, and just looking forward to there's a lot of things to kind of look forward to, but again, as I talked about at the beginning, just sort of enjoying the kind of the moment to moment during these times in particular when it is slower, so quote unquote slower. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I've been a little on and off on basketball. The Warriors have been winning some games, much needed games. They're playing the Thunder tonight, and apparently everybody's resting. So it could be this trap game for the Thunder. I just don't really think it's gonna. I just don't think the Warriors are gonna win this one. But I think I'm just kind of like in and out of basketball right now. It's kind of that. These are the dog days, as I've talked about. It really is. I think teams are kind of the way they are. In particular for the Warriors, as I've talked about, I do think that there has to be some type of shift, some type of trade to make them exciting again and make them a potential playoff threat. Kind of what they did last year in shaking things up with adding Jimmy. That kind of feels that has it run its course, at least in terms of, having that sort of initial spurt. But I think there has to be some other pieces moved and added, most notably Kuminga. That's going to be coming up pretty soon. The January 15th deadline, I believe, is when the trade restrictions are going to be lifted off of him. So I think that there's going to be a period of time between then and early February, I believe, before the All-Star break, when they can make a move. I know from what I've heard that there are maybe not as many potential suitors for Kuminga. I'm just hoping that maybe some of these other tanking teams would be willing to kind of give that a chance. I think the name that is most attached to a potential move for the Warriors right now is Michael Porter Jr., which I think would be good. Just having another movement shooter, very high and efficient 3-point shooter plus size as well. So that would be great. So I think that could be a good move for the Warriors. I don't know if how effective is that going to be in the postseason? I don't know, but right now we're not even in the playoff picture, so they have to get there. They have to sort of they have to make a similar type of trajectory going into kind of the All-Star break, as they did last year after getting Jimmy. So listen, I'm not trying to be I'm going to be very realistic. There is a clear ceiling. I just don't think there's not going to be any trade that's going to make this team a title contender. There's just not. But if they can put themselves, again, like they did last year, if they can put themselves in a position to be in playoff contention, I think that could be good. Just high leverage situations, high intensity situations one more time if they can. And then, we'll see what the rest looks like. But hopefully they can try to make a move that does something and at least makes this kind of, this plus probably one more. I know Steph has looked awesome this year. But I'm just keeping my expectations in check as well, right? I just don't know, how much of this he's able to carry forward for the next couple of seasons, right? As he becomes 38, 39. I would love for him to be able to continue to perform at this level. But as we're seeing with LeBron, who's 41, he's had some good moments for sure, but he's had some incredible moments as someone over 40, but you can also see him significantly slowing down in a lot of areas. And I think that it's better to kind of anticipate that a little bit with Steph, and just try your best to prolong what you can in this current period at this in this juncture for this season, and do the best they can to make the pieces fit around him, right? And I think that's all you can really do at this point. I guess we'll see kind of what the trade packages look like in the next couple of weeks. So a little bare bones with the basketball right now, but eventually I'll get back into it. It just feels very much like a lull right now, and it's usually the case during the season, right? It is kind of the dog days for me in particular. Anyways, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening as always. This has been Save the Semantics, signing off.